Have you ever found yourself in a place that many never fully prepare for? Living in the hospital? Whether it be days, weeks, months, extended hospitalizations can truly disrupt your time. They can change your identity and really put physical and emotional strains on you that you've never prepared for. Well, in today's episode, we're going to help you to understand how to care for yourself and not lose yourself in the process of caring for someone else.
Welcome to Grace to Care. Take a breath, pull up a chair, little laugh, little truth to share with Grace to Care. Together for the ones who hold it off through the late calls.
Welcome to Grace to Care. I'm Ferne Sapp.
And I'm Jessica Banner, and we're here having conversations on the grief, grit, and gift of caregiving.
Reminding you that in caregiving, you're never meant to walk alone because we are Grace to Care. Well, hello again, Jessica.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Good to see you.
It is absolutely good to be back. I'm excited about today because we get a chance to tap on this ecosystem and to really look at this hospitalization and what to really do with ourselves during this time.
Yeah, I'm really glad we're talking about this because I think as we've been talking to people and with people, we've got a lot of people in our community that have been dealing with long-term hospital stays. So I think this is perfect timing to be having this conversation.
You're right. We've been talking about how we've been sitting in waiting rooms or moving from waiting room to waiting room. But the reality is it's really about dealing with the waiting room that's within and understanding that during this time period, taking care of yourself or having self-care is critical. It's key.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about the reality of living in the hospital, right? Those are those moments where adrenaline can be high, tons of information, your normal routines are kind of blown up, right? Like you're just not living in that normal space at all. And you're having new things thrown at you and adjustments. And so I love that we're talking about it today, jumping into that.
I do. Sometimes what happens is that people see self-care as this place of indulgence. But the reality is self-care at this space is not about being indulgent. It's really about placing yourself at a spot where you don't burn out, where you don't run out, where you don't rust out, if you will. But you really get to this spot where you care for yourself so that you can sustain, because sometimes it's a long haul.
Yeah. And, and I think about most often when we're in the hospital, that's a time of crisis for most people. And it's one thing to be in crisis for a couple of days, but it's another when you're having to look at how am I living in what may feel like a longer term crisis? Because what happens if I am in the hospital for days, weeks, months? And so that does something to your body, to your mind, to your emotions. And it's really critical to have some key things that really help you stay grounded and take care of yourself, because you are not living even in your normal caregiving bubble. Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that we're going to talk about some very practical ways that we can really take care of ourselves. I know that for me, one of the very important ones was what we've been calling this micro rest, right? Mm-hmm. This micro rest, right? In this time and in this season, it's easy to feel like I just didn't get enough rest, or I wasn't able to go to sleep. But now it's not about focusing on the 8 hours, but it's really focusing on these spaces where we can get what we call that micro, that little spot, that little space. It may be a quick nap. Right. It may be where we have to make the adjustment, inside of the hospital chair and get ourselves, positioned for how we're going to rest there.
Absolutely.
But it may even be going home for just a little bit and taking a nap at home.
Yep. Getting that fresh shower, that real shower, right? Mm-hmm. Hospital showers never feel like real showers. Yeah, I think it's so important because nobody rests well in a hospital, right? Even the research shows that. Mm-hmm. The care receiver doesn't rest well in a hospital. Caregivers don't rest well in a hospital because the furniture's not designed for it. The equipment, the beeping, the in and out of people at all hours of the day. So it is important for your body, but also for your mind and emotions. Go out to the parking lot and take that walk. Go home for a night. Get a night's rest. Get your nap. Step out in the hallway. Your body needs to move. So we're going to talk about a lot more of that today, but that micro rest, stepping out because your body is not getting its normal rest. Yeah. There's a lot of interruption and disruption.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to do that. Something else that we find that's very practical, and that is preparing that, what we like to call that caregiver go bag, right? Mm-hmm. I know for me, organization is key. And so if we can get organized and stay organized and be prepared for, the hospital stay, it helps things a lot. And so it's getting things like toiletries and putting them inside of our bag, or those comfortable clothes, something that you can layer on and off and take on and off. For me, it was my fuzzy wuzzy socks with the little grips on the bottom, right? Yeah. Because I like to, be warm, and I'm also a germaphobe. And so I don't want to touch anything on the floor. Gotcha. And so just having those, having those socks on, things that can help the stay to become one that, is a little more bearable. What are some things that you put into your caregiver go bag?
Well, I'm always going to take my journal, but that goes with me everywhere I go. Mm-hmm. So that's one of them. But I think things even like snacks you like, a drink you like. And the thing about your caregiver bag is it's so easy to feel that loss of identity long term when you're in the hospital, because you're not touching typically most normal parts of your life. And it can feel very mechanical, very clinical, and just having those little touchstones can be so helpful. It could be a picture you like. It can even be a decoration if you're going to be there long term, right? Something that brings you joy, something you can look at, But definitely those snacks, because hospital food and vending machine life is not a life. It's not real life, right? So sometimes hospitals are a place you're allowed to have a little bit of your comfort food.
Because you need it, right? You need it. I also would have to make sure that we bring our phone chargers and sometimes an extension cord, because you are going to need your phone, and you are going to need to stay in communication with other people. So those are just things that we put inside of that bag, just to help us. But the other thing too that's very practical, and again, these are just simple things that can help us, but that is learning how to really protect our body. As caregivers, we have to find that space where we understand that the physical strain that we're experiencing in the hospital is cumulative. Mm-hmm. So if you've already gone through the space, let's just say you went to the ER, or from the ER to the hospital. Well, that was physical strain. Mm-hmm. And then now you get into the hospital room and you're sitting inside of that chair. Today I've got the tongue tie, right? But you're sitting inside that chair. That's physical strain, right? Mm-hmm. And now you're having to get up and down every time somebody comes in the door. That's physical strain. Well, it's cumulative.
It is.
And because it's stacking upon itself and building, we have to find ways, it could be something, you talked about this before, and that is stepping outside. But even when you're going out there, stretching, right? Just finding that space where you stretch your body out, reposture yourself, find that breathing, doing your counts, your 5 count, your 5 breaths in, and you're holding for 5, and your 5 breaths out, but doing things where you really protect your own body.
Yeah. I think people underestimate, it's a powerful thing when you're stuck in a 10 by 10 room. And that 10 by 10 room does not have comfortable furniture, and it has other sensory irritants like the beeping and things like that. And so that can be very jarring, very wearing on the body. And it's important that your eyes need to see more. Our bodies are made to move. And one of the things we don't really account for when we're in the hospital is we have a lot of natural movement in our normal schedules. Even if it's to go upstairs to the office, or, walking around the house to do the dishes, we have a lot of natural movement in our natural rhythms, but in the hospital, all that comes to a standstill. And so your body, even in the little movements, you're not getting a lot of that. And your body does feel that. And it, like you said, that cumulative experience of not getting that movement, you can start to ache. You can start to feel more irritated. Your sensory can start feeling off. And so, get up, go take the walk, socialize. I'll tell you, I talk to more strangers in a hospital than I probably do anywhere else, because there's something about that shared experience, even in just protecting your mind and your body, get out, stretch. I know lots of people who've walked a lot of laps around a hospital, myself included, because it's important. Even just sometimes you explore a hospital. You learn a lot about hospitals when you're in them, because you just walk them, right?
That is true.
You start knowing where all the departments are. I don't know about you, but I know there's times I've pointed strangers to departments just because I was walking around the hospital.
Been there, done that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or, finding out where the real nook and crannies are, because sometimes the vending machines, some of them are hidden or,
Yes.
down another hall when this one
Yeah.
goes out. But yes, absolutely. Because the reality is that we cannot pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
And so our bodies have to be replenished. Our bodies have to be protected so that we're able to give out to those that we're coming in contact with, and also be there, to care for our loved one.
Well, and I think that takes us to that next space, because we need to take good care of our bodies, but we also need to take good care of our mind, right? And our emotions live in our mind. And there's a lot going on. Hospitals are typically very high emotive places for us, because there can be fear, concern, uncertainty. And so it's usually high emotion, especially because if we're at the hospital, it usually means something's not okay, right? Somebody may be in pain, that you don't want your loved one suffering. And that it's a lot of information too, right? You may be talking to doctors after doctor after doctor, and we need the emotional release. We need to talk to people. We need to journal. We need to take our notes, do those kinds of things. So
I
it can be
often
critical.
see it like the emotions being like this pressure cooker. My grandmother used to have a pressure cooker. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those, but my grandmother used to have a pressure cooker, and she cooked everything in the pressure cooker. But I remember how she used to have to do things to release it, and let some of the steam out. Right. And that's what happens when we're in the hospital. We have to kind of see that our emotions can become this pressure cooker, and we have to find ways to release the valve, to open it up. And like you said, there are a lot of things. It even comes down to texting a trusted person.
You are absolutely right. Texting can be critical. When we think about that emotional space in the hospital, it's important not to suppress it, because there's so much going on, and there's a lot of information coming at you, and that information may mean something right now, and it may mean something for the future, right? Because some of it could mean changes in care and all those things, and your mind's trying to sort through it all, and it all has a lot of emotional weight for you in your own life, and also for your care receiver. And you're not getting breaks. It's just a constant inundation with one person after another. So it can be just really important to have those moments that you're intentionally processing what you're taking in. And it's a great time to encourage those people to visit, because we may need touchstones that aren't clinical to help us process, right? And nurses and techs and doctors are phenomenal in their support and their care for us. But sometimes we just need someone who's going to laugh with us about normal things, or someone who can help us talk through the hard thing that may be happening in the room.
Yeah, or someone that can help us cry. I was visiting and speaking with a caregiver on yesterday, and we just talked about the need sometimes just to cry, and just allowing yourself that space to cry. It really does relief, or provides that release. And so I love it. And again, they're just practical ways. Just giving yourself the permission, giving yourself permission. One of our other practical ways that we love to talk about, and that is being willing to ask for help without feeling guilty. Asking for help without feeling guilty. It's a tough one.
Yeah. But it's necessary. And in fact, it's almost unavoidable if you're in a long-term hospital stay, because some of you may be parents, some of you may have other obligations, you have work obligations, those normal rhythms of your life may still be happening, but you can't be in two places at once, right? And so who's watching the children, who are running the errands that are critical to keep your life on the outside still functioning while you're inside having to function. And so it may be letting people watch the kids, or run them to the sport, or let them stay at your house and watch them. It may be, hey, can you run an errand for me that's really important?
Yeah. And it could be something. I remember being rushed off to the hospital. Well, when you're rushed off to the hospital, of course, if you've got your caregiver, go bag, then you have everything you need while you're there. But there are some things sometimes that you left dangling at home. Yes. And so I found out that it's okay to ask my neighbor, hey, listen, the trash really does need to go out, because I don't know how long we're going to be be here, and we may have had some mishaps that need to be gone, before you get there. But again, it's not having that guilt, understanding that it is a part of, again, we're going to talk about again the ecosystem, but it is a part of having that community and not feeling guilty to ask someone to really help you.
And part of that asking for help may also be asking people to come and stay. That may be for a couple of hours, because the reality is in our life, we have errands that other people cannot run for us, right? If I've got to go to the bank or attend a certain kind of meeting or appointment, but I need somebody at the hospital, especially if I know a critical test is happening or that kind of thing. So part of the ask could be, could you come here? Or I need that hour, I need that night home sleeping. Do you mind staying overnight? And those are usually our more safe, intimate people that we're going to do the overnight, the ones we trust to manage the information and really advocate. But because it is letting people into a very personal part of your life, but it is critical, especially if you're going to be there long term.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oftentimes we think about advocating for the care recipient, for our loved one. But when you're in the hospital, you really have to shift our minds where we start realizing that we have to advocate even for ourselves, because the caregiver often becomes this unofficial care advocate. But when you leave there, you've got all this information. It's like, no, wait a minute. While I'm there, I'm going to advocate for myself. The very first thing that we say we have to do is ask questions.
Yes.
Ask questions. I may not understand what you just said. What you just told me may be in a medical language, or I need it interpreted in layman's terms. I need to ask, what does this mean for me in the next 24 hours? What does this mean for us when we get home?
Right.
Ask questions, because those are questions that help you.
Yeah. One of the most critical things we do as a caregiver is ask questions. And not just ask questions, ask until we understand. Don't be afraid to say, could you explain that again, or in another way? Or can we talk about the real implications of what you're telling me so that I can make my best decisions? Because the reality is, when you're in a long-term hospital stay, your mind is not at its sharpest most of the time, because like we said, all that sensory data, all the information pouring in, the concern, the heightened emotion and concern, we're really in survival mode. And so we really need good information. And so don't be afraid to ask until you understand. Really, you may really have to advocate, not just for your care receiver, but also for yourself, because these decisions may have long-term implications.
Absolutely.
So it's important to know and understand.
Absolutely. I often say too, we have to keep a notebook, keep a care notebook. Now, I've got my handy dandy orange notebook. I take it with me every time we go to the doctor, every time we go to the hospital. In fact, it's a part of my caregiver go bag, because I understand that I need to be able to take notes.
Yes.
First of all, you're going to give me a lot of information. So you're going to get a lot of information. Several doctors may come in because it may be a part of a care team. And so maybe you saw the neurologist, and maybe the primary care doctor came in, and maybe another specialist. I need to know who you are. And so that's a good space for me to go ahead, write down those names. So I use that space to really take notes. But then not just that, anything that you say that we have to change. Maybe there are some meds. Yes, when we leave there, they're going to more than likely give you the summary. But if I have the notebook now,
Right.
I'm able to process some things after they've gone out of that room, so that before we leave that hospital, if I have more questions, I can ask them because I've taken good notes.
Well, and discharge summaries never have all the information you took on and in those little micro conversations you had across your stay. And so the other thing that having the notebook does is it helps you be more present in each conversation. And a lot of times doctors and nurses are moving very quickly. There's a lot of people who need help and care. And so they're trying to give you a lot of information very fast. And some of our brains just don't move that quickly. Our emotions may not move that quickly. And having that written down gives you space to process in the in-between. It may having those notes let you and your care receiver talk about it. It's a great place to write questions for the next time they come to visit so that you don't lose them. Because a lot of times if we had 10 questions, we only remember one, but the other 9 were important, and so it's a great space. It's also a good handoff.
Yes.
Like for those people who stay, they can capture the information for you. They'll have a little bit of update if there's some critical things that needed to be tended to. So it is an excellent tool to make sure you capture as much of what you need to know so that you can make your best decisions.
Yeah, get you a handy dandy. It doesn't have to be orange, whatever your favorite color is, right? Get you a handy dandy.
And you don't have to use a magic crown either.
You don't. But then there's also, okay, so we're at the hospital. Now there comes this time where we've got to transition back into community care. So now we got to move from the hospital, right? Living in the hospital to leaving the hospital. Leaving can be, I find, sometimes one of the most heightened and intense moments. It can be a moment where, depending on what we're leaving with, it can be a moment of fear. It can be a moment of anxiety.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about some things that we know can be helpful so that we're able to make that transition back into community care.
Yeah, I think one of the big things about that transition is you may have given up some of the things you do as a caregiver, right? You're not doing medicines and things like that. And you're about to take that whole thing back on, right? And you also maybe get into different situations. You may be going home. You may be going other places. And what the care you're providing may be different. And so one of the first things that's important is understanding what is the level of care needed. Were there any changes in how we care and what needs to happen to care?
Yeah. That's true. Another thing that we need to do is, make sure that we stand as that advocate for what's realistic in this discharge plan, right? What's realistic? Because sometimes, because of the way that the system is set up, they could say, okay, we're going to be discharged tomorrow. Well, maybe you don't feel comfortable in the discharge, and it's okay. It's okay to say, I really don't feel comfortable with him or her being discharged right now. Let's talk a little bit more. So getting and gathering more information before it's just, adios, we'll see you the next time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and that's why it's also important to understand what you need, because you are the only one who knows what you're truly capable of. You know what your resources are, you know what your time is, you know what your physical ability is, depending on level of care. And that moment of discharge, when you're in that discharge planning moment, that's the place where you have to have conversations about what's it actually going to take, especially if there's any changes, right? And in a hospital, your discharge planner, which is usually the hospital social workers, right? They really are your go-between. They're the person that if you're like, oh wait, I've been told this discharge plan, but that's not going to work, or this really isn't, I don't know how to make this happen. Your social worker, it is key to advocate, because they're the ones that are going to go back to the team and say, they need to know about this. They need to know what we're going to do about this. They need support with this. So they're really the ones who are advocating on our behalf, and also maybe connecting us to the resources to make some of that happen. So really important.
Yeah. And it helps us too at that time to look to see, do we need to redefine, right? What are our roles at home? What role will we be playing? Going back to what you were talking about, what can you realistically manage? But also looking to see, where do you need help, right? Where do you need help at? Maybe you need a caregiver, to come in more. Maybe you do need more of an OT staff or a PT staff. Or one of the things I found out that really helped us when we made the transition back home was, guess what? We really do need the speech pathologist. And it could seem really weird. What do you mean? He just had XYZ. Why do we need the speech pathologist? Well, in Parkinson's, speech sometimes changes during hospitalization. And so when we get back home, I needed that time with that person. Why? So that we can help his speech to become stronger, so that I'm able to provide care, for him in a great way.
Well, and a lot of times, just like we were talking about movement in our body, our care receivers may not be moving as much as they normally do. And so muscles can atrophy a little bit, not a lot necessarily, but long term you can see that. And so they may need a little PT, they may need a little OT, to just get back to that more their highest level of functioning. The goal is always highest level of functioning, right? And so what are the things and the tools we need to get there?
I love it. Caregiving changes everything, and that's why we've created our Grace to Care affirmation journal. It's available in both English and Spanish versions.
The pages are filled with encouragements, reflections, and gentle reminders that you are not alone.
Just a few minutes a day can allow you to have the time to pause, to reflect, and to really just stay grounded.
And to get your copy, you can get it at gracetocare.com or the link in our bio.
For some caregivers, it's not even about being able to go home. Yeah. Now it's about transitioning to maybe a rehab facility or an assisted care living. And that in and of itself just brings on an entirely different approach. I remember the first time that Willie had to go to a rehab facility. He had gone through his back surgery. And of course, when he came out, just unexpected, he was not able to walk at the level. And so I remember the PT guy coming in and him saying he's going to have to go to a rehab facility. Mm-hmm. And I will never forget him sitting on the side of that bed and him weeping. Mm-hmm. I had never seen him cry. Wow. Up until that point in our marriage. I had never seen him cry. And I remember him sitting on the side of that bed crying. And he said, I just don't want to go. I don't want to go. And I got down on the floor and just looked up at him. And I was like, I'm going to be with you. You're going to be okay. We have to do this. Mm-hmm. And we did some very practical things right there on the floor. One is established for him that I was going to be there, right? He wasn't going to be alone. He wouldn't be abandoned. And then two, we set a date. We set a time. We say, hey, listen, they say 21 is typical. Why don't we set it so that you go for 14 days? Mm-hmm. And that right there helped with the transition. But the reality is, Jessica, is that we've got to talk about the fact that there is this emotional shift.
There is. That
we've got to acknowledge when you're moving into a rehab or, from the hospital to the rehab or some type of assisted living.
Yeah, and it's emotional for both people. Mm-hmm. Right? Because oftentimes for care receivers, like you were describing for Willie, they have fear of abandonment. Yeah. There can be the fear of, I'm not going back to my normal life. And what's hard about rehab and assisted living is, for some people it is temporary. It's mm-hmm. the stepping stone home. And for some people it may not be. Yeah. And you may be recalculating. And sometimes it's unknown mm-hmm. what's going to happen. And so there's a lot of variability, and that can be very scary. Mm-hmm. It's a lot to try to process, especially because you're in the midst of a discharge mm-hmm. that feels like my whole life may be changing. Even if it's temporary, there's that unknown and it not know what to expect. And so needing to process that. You may even need to process that with some other people. But mm-hmm. I like that you guys set some things for yourself to mm-hmm. make that happen. But if you have children or, people around that kind of help make that, can help to know we're not alone in walking that emotional shift out. Yeah, for sure.
And also knowing, because remember, this is time when we're talking about self-care. We're talking about really caring for yourself, but also understanding that even in this transition, now is a time to establish your rest, because it is that space where things are going to change slightly. And so now you can get some different rest patterns, spend more time with other people now, because this can be a period where you're able to really refresh yourself. Yes. And really get reset for what's next.
Right. It's twofold too, because mm-hmm. you're having to recoup from being in the hospital, mm-hmm. but it can be just enough of a timeout from maybe the amount of work you're normally having to do mm-hmm. to get a really good refreshing for when they're fully coming back home. Yeah.
Something else that has to happen during this time period, and it's also about that care, but also really setting a rhythm for visiting. Because the reality is that you may not be able to be there every day, all day.
Right.
There are some caregivers who you actually have a full-time job. And so you're not able to be there all day, every day. But I think that establishing that visiting rhythm can be helpful, not just for yourself, because it can help to relieve some of that guilt, but also it can be helpful for the staff, right? They can understand that you'll be coming in and out.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the reality is that in many facilities, they need to know that you're coming in and out. They need to know that you're there. So it does establish a rhythm so that they can know that you're there and you're present, right?
It creates that accountability as a whole team.
Yes.
Me as a caregiver, my care recipient, and all the professionals, that this is a team approach, and I'm not absent from the approach. Absolutely.
Not absent and not abandoned. You talked about that once.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of times for caregivers, their mentality and emotional health, that's another reason why it's so important to have a routine to visit. But, I had a couple grandmothers who did stints in rehab in their journey, and it made a huge difference. When we would visit, their spirits were uplifted. They would feel more motivated for their rehab processes, the PT, OT, and it matters, because a lot of times when people feel that sense of abandonment or that lack of connection, because they're seeing professionals, but if they're not having that personal connection, sometimes that really impacts motivation towards getting better. So it's really important, that rhythm of visiting and staying in touch, because it feeds the motivation oftentimes with the care recipient too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's also important to stay involved, but not consumed. And I'll say it again, stay involved, but not consumed. Allow the staff that is there to do their job, right? Allow them to carry out their function, what they're there for. And so you can have that presence, still be the advocate, still visit, still monitor, still oversee the care, but understand that during this time period, to care for yourself, allow them to care for your loved one, so that you're not consumed with that during this period.
And a lot of times too, it's a space for the care recipient to work on their autonomy, for them to have confidence in what they can do and find out what they can do. And sometimes having that little bit, we're here, but I'm not here all the time, lets them work with the professionals to really kind of remaster. Because in the hospital, professionals, you're there all the time. They haven't been feeling great. So it's a great space where confidence can kind of be rebuilt into, what am I really able to do to be the best version of me coming out.
I love that. Here's the last thing that I think is important for us to talk about, and that is scheduling your own care. Taking care of yourself. So we talk about some of the practical things you can do while the person's in the hospital, when they're leaving out of the hospital, whether they're coming home or whether they're going to a rehab facility. But it's also important that during this time period, you schedule time for your own care. This can be the time when you schedule your doctor's visit. This can be the time when you schedule time to see your counselor, right? I realized during this space that I had to have counsel, that there were spaces where I needed to be able to vent a little further, or to share a little more, or to get down to the bottom of some things, right? So this is time to take care of yourself in many ways.
Well, and oftentimes too, after a long hospital stay, let's be real, when you're in the hospital, everything goes away. You've probably canceled your own appointments a lot of the time. You've pushed things off, and it's kind of having to catch back up and to replenish. And the one thing truly for caregivers is those missed appointments, those missed things to really take care of yourself. It's cumulative when you're not doing that. And so making sure, just really intentional to get regrounded to, I'm back home, even if they're in rehab, and when we're fully back home, because when they're coming back home, you are picking it all back up. You're getting back into the normal rhythm, which is what you know. But when you've been away from it for a little bit, there is still a part of that weight of picking it back up, right? Yes. And it's a loving weight, but it's okay, gotta pick the bag back up, right? And so that needs care, because you are going to be busy again in a different way, and you may more tasks on the body and mental and emotional, because you're back on your meds and you're back in the keeping after the things that need to get done. So it's super important to just connect with friends, get some good rest, counselors, people who can help process out a little bit of what we've just been through, get regrounded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get regrounded. Well, listen, if you're in this space right now, maybe you're between machines and monitors or in that space of uncertainty, we want you to know that it's okay, right? That's going to be our line. Hashtag it's okay. It really is. It's okay. It's okay for you to take care of yourself. It's okay for you to have self-care, even in the midst of having to care for someone else. If this episode resonated with you in any way, be sure to like it, share it, tag people in it, because this is something that we found that have helped us, and we know that it's something out there that can help other people as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, listen, Jessica, that's it for today. Thank you all for joining us in our conversations on this grief, the grit, right? And the gift of caregiving. And remember that in caregiving, you're never meant to walk this road alone, because we are graced to care together. See you next time.
In caregiving, you're never meant to walk alone. We're graced to care together.